The marriage never collapsed overnight. It eroded in quiet, calculated pieces, beginning with the shift in Daniel's eyes when he stopped looking at me as a partner and started looking at me as an obligation. I kept trying to convince myself that the long work nights, the sudden change in wardrobe, the new cologne he claimed was a gift from a client, were harmless, but every excuse he gave me carried the same coldness. He treated my questions like interruptions, brushing them aside with a laugh that felt rehearsed. The distance between us grew so gradually that by the time I realized how far apart we were, I could barely remember the last time he touched me without checking his phone in the middle of it. I tried to talk to him gently, hoping to revive something, but he called me paranoid, emotional, and ungrateful for the life he provided. What he didn't say, but often implied, was that the prenup ensured I should stay silent. He insisted on that contract before the wedding, saying it was only to protect our future, but in practice it became a weapon he used whenever he felt inconvenienced. Any disagreement ended with him reminding me that everything, house, savings, business, was legally his. I ignored the sting for years, telling myself that marriage required compromise, even when the compromise was my dignity. But the shift became impossible to ignore when the lies stopped being subtle. He canceled our anniversary dinner, claiming a late client meeting, only for me to find a hotel receipt in his coat pocket the next day. The perfume on his shirt wasn't mine, and the message flashing across his phone, "Same time tonight," wasn't meant for me. My heart didn't break, it numbed. I stopped asking questions he would never answer truthfully. I simply watched him move further away while acting like I should be grateful he hadn't left yet. His laughter on the phone one night finally pushed me past denial. I stood behind the hallway wall, listening to him boast that once the divorce happened, I'd walk away with pennies, and he'd be free to enjoy life without dead weight. That was the moment something inside me clicked, not in rage but in clarity. The next morning, I contacted a lawyer. I didn't cry, I didn't even tremble, I simply handed over the prenup I had been forced to sign years ago. And when the lawyer looked at it, brows lifting with a slow, knowing expression, I realized the story wasn't ending the way Daniel imagined. I didn't let Daniel see even a flicker of what I knew. While he strutted around the house with that confident smirk, bragging about future plans that didn't include me, I quietly documented every lie he thought he had buried. I saved screenshots of late-night messages, captured photos of him slipping into hotels under the disguise of client dinners, and gathered bank records showing dinners, jewelry purchases, and weekend trips he never took with me. Every piece of evidence wasn't for revenge, it was for clarity, proof that my instincts weren't madness like he wanted me to believe. The more I collected, the more the numbness lifted, replaced by a strange calm. I wasn't hoping for him to change anymore, I was preparing to end what he had already destroyed. The lawyer I met with examined everything, flipping the prenup pages with a focus that made my heart beat slower, steadier. He asked for the original contract, the one Daniel brandished over me like a leash. When I handed it to him, he didn't laugh or gasp, he simply nodded, studying one section longer than the rest. He didn't reveal everything yet, only telling me to stay silent and let Daniel continue believing he held all the power. At home, Daniel grew bolder. He stopped hiding his phone, stopped pretending he cared about my feelings. He made comments about moving in with someone who actually appreciates him, sometimes loud enough for me to hear from the next room. He mocked my quietness, assuming it came from fear of losing the financial security he claimed he alone had built. What he didn't know was that silence was my strategy, not my surrender. When he finally shoved the divorce papers across the table, he looked thrilled, almost giddy. "You should sign quickly," he told me, tapping the prenup section as if delivering a punchline. "No point dragging this out. We both know what you walk away with." I signed with steady hands, and the confidence in his eyes only grew. He mistook my composure for defeat. Walking into the courthouse with him felt surreal. He strutted ahead like a man who had already won, greeting people with forced charm, cracking jokes to lighten the tension. Meanwhile, my lawyer's expression remained calm, almost amused, making it clear something larger was about to unfold. Daniel couldn't sense it. He was too busy enjoying the fantasy where he walked away rich and celebrated, while I walked away with nothing. What he didn't realize was that the moment he laughed at my supposed weakness, the ground beneath him was already cracking. Daniel walked into the courtroom like he owned the place, shoulders back, chin high, wearing the same grin he used whenever he thought he was outsmarting someone. When the clerk called our case, he leaned toward me and whispered, "Try not to cry when the judge reads the prenup," as if this was some performance meant to entertain him. I didn't react. I didn't even look at him. My lawyer had already told me to stay composed because the moment Daniel believed he had won was the moment he would fall the hardest. When the divorce proceedings began, Daniel practically rushed through every formality. He signed the papers with an exaggerated flourish, letting out a small laugh that echoed a bit too loudly in the quiet courtroom. He even attempted a joke with the judge, something about getting this over with so we can both move on. The judge didn't laugh. Instead, he calmly asked for the prenuptial agreement, flipping through the pages with the slow precision of someone who knew exactly what he was looking for. Daniel's smirk faltered the first time the judge frowned. It deepened when the judge flipped back to the first page, then to the signature line, then to the witness section. My lawyer didn't say a word, he simply watched, hands folded, waiting for the revelation to land. The silence stretched long enough for Daniel to start shifting in his seat. His confidence was still there, but it had a crack running through it. Finally, the judge cleared his throat and looked directly at Daniel. "Mr. Carter," he said, "this agreement isn't legally valid." Daniel blinked, then laughed as if it were a misunderstanding. But the judge didn't soften. He explained, clearly, methodically, how the prenup was never properly filed, how the witness signature was incomplete, and how the filing date didn't match state requirements. In other words, the contract Daniel had used for years to control me was worth absolutely nothing. Daniel's face drained of color. He tried to argue, insisting his lawyer had handled everything back then. The judge shut him down with a calm firmness that made his panic louder. As the reality settled, Daniel's voice cracked with disbelief. He tried turning toward me, as if I had orchestrated some grand deception, but I kept my eyes forward, speaking only when the judge asked simple, direct questions. Without the prenup, the marriage fell under standard marital property laws. The house, the assets, the savings, even the business earnings, all up for fair division. Daniel's hands trembled as he tried to object, but the judge reminded him he had laughed while signing, not realizing he was laughing at his own downfall. The man who walked into the courtroom certain he would walk away untouched now sat frozen, watching everything he tried to keep from me slip right through his fingers. And the best part was this: I didn't have to raise my voice, fight, or argue. Truth had simply surfaced, exactly when it needed to. When the hearing ended, Daniel followed me out of the courtroom with the frantic energy of a man watching the life he built around arrogance crumble. His earlier confidence was gone, replaced by pleading disguised as negotiation. He tried softening his voice, calling me by the nickname he hadn't used in years, insisting that we didn't have to tear each other apart. It would have been convincing if it didn't come minutes after he realized he no longer held the upper hand. I didn't raise my voice or remind him of his late-night insults or the woman he had been parading behind my back. I simply told him the truth, that the marriage ended long before the court declared it, and the only thing left to protect was my peace. He opened his mouth to argue again, but the emptiness in my expression must have shown him I was already gone. Outside, the sunlight felt unfamiliar, as if I had stepped out of a long, windowless room. For the first time in years, I inhaled without feeling someone else's expectations pressing on my chest. The courthouse doors shut behind me, and with them, every memory of begging for affection, swallowing disrespect, and pretending not to notice infidelity. I didn't feel triumphant, I felt free in a quiet, steady way that didn't need celebration. My lawyer handed me the finalized documents and congratulated me, but even that felt secondary to the relief of simply being done. Word of the prenup disaster must have traveled fast, because the other woman didn't stick around long after learning Daniel's assets were now split. The life he promised her wasn't as shiny once she realized half of it no longer existed. I didn't need revenge, watching his own choices unravel was enough. He had gambled everything on my silence, not knowing I had stopped being afraid the moment I chose myself. With the settlement, I secured a portion of the house, financial stability, and enough support to rebuild the life I lost during the years I spent shrinking myself for him. I moved into a smaller place filled with sunlight instead of tension, reconnected with friends I had slowly drifted from, and rediscovered simple routines that made me feel human again. Healing didn't require dramatic gestures, just consistency, space, and the absence of someone who thrived on making me feel small. Looking back, I realized I didn't win because Daniel lost. I won because I walked away from a future defined by someone else's ego. I didn't need his apology or closure. The silence he once used to punish me now belonged to me, and in that quiet, I finally heard the version of myself I had been too afraid to believe in.